is still far from comforts and safety on our roads, hence constant tinkering with the laws on their effective management. As part of this, the National Assembly has transmitted the Federal Roads Bill and National Road Fund Bill to President Muhammadu Buhari for assent. The bills, which were passed by the House of Representatives in December 2019 and concurred by the Senate in October 2021, were sponsored by Deputy Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, Toby Okechukwu and Osai Nicholas. The bills are expected to facilitate private sector participation in the development, financing, maintenance and management and improvement of roads in Nigeria. What is this about?
Yeah, you know, the way things are now, our roads are in a terrible state, whether they are federal roads or state roads. And the concern has always been, where would you find the funding to improve the state of those roads? Now, even the roads that you gave out the contract, you are owing contractors so much money. So you are already a debtor to contractors. How will you now find, you now appropriate maybe for, let's even say 400 billion in the budget to roads? It will never be sufficient.
For an alternative.
It will never be sufficient because you are owing. Even the people that you are owing, you need to first pay. We have all kinds of abandoned road contracts across, littering the whole country. Those road contracts are held up by inadequate funding. One. Secondly, what is allocated to take care of roads is grossly inadequate. We've had to even go and take some money from the sovereign wealth fund, you know, sovereign wealth account, just to be able to take care of critical roads like the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, like the second Niger Bridge and all that. So the issue is funding. The biggest problem is funding. How do we find the funds to be able to fix our decrepit roads? How do we ensure that constantly the roads are maintained? It is the roads, that one is also down to funding. How do we get the private sector involved in the management and sustenance of our roads? So these are issues that have to be talked about. With the government has already agreed or resolved to bring back the toll gates that Obasanjo removed. Okay, so that you can pay a toll. If you pay some money, maybe 10 naira, you pay 10 naira here. I've just used that as an illustration because 10 naira is not money in Nigeria anymore. I just bought bread, 750 a loaf. The usual, I used to buy it 250 naira last year. Sometime last year. It's now 750
last week.
So it's 750 now. 750. That's what I bought it in Akute. Before they start asking where they do buy, go and buy your own two in Akute. You see that it's 750. You are not going to make this look like the tomato thing. Go and buy it in Akute. It's 750. Now 10 naira, as I was saying, is not. I'm just using that as an illustration. If you pay at the toll gate, it means that they can find the funding to maintain the roads, and it's cheaper to pay for the maintenance of the road than to go and spend so much money at the mechanics workshop. That is what a lot of our people don't realize. Also, I say, why are they bringing back the toll gates, this and that?
Pay for it, you enjoy the
yes. So the National Assembly has come up with all kinds of ideas by which it hopes we can at least solve this problem. We can find consistent funding for these roads. One just hopes that as we go on, government will continue to prioritize the key roads so that funding can be available for those ones, and ensure that our roads are not the death traps that they are. We have the worst roads on the continent. We need to do something about that.
So, Dr. this, as Julie said, it's almost impossible for us to finance this thing, because when you look at the road littered across the country, and even this administration, as part of their achievements, they've tried in terms of road infrastructure, but their best seems not to be enough, because it's very expensive.
It obviously can be, with the cost of things in the country. It obviously can be. The best cannot be good enough. Beyond what BQ said about going to the mechanic, we also have seen from reports that the number of hours we lose to traffic, especially in Lagos, owing to insufficient or bad roads, is enormous. Enormous. It's also as a result of bad roads, in most cases, that kidnappers are able to operate.
Yes.
It's also as a, because where you slow down, they come out of the bush, and then they latch on to people.
People police funnily use
Bad
portion
as
roadblock.
Yes, so that you wait for you to
be able to move away.
Okay, but joining us from our Abuja studio for more discussion on this is the chairman of House of Representative Committee on Works, Honorable Tobe Okechukwu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've changed status. I'm Deputy Minority Leader now.
Okay.
I was Chairman House Committee on Works 2015 to 2019.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can you tell us what this bill is about in the National Assembly? The bill that was passed in the...
When we came in 2015, we looked at the spectrum of issues in the Ministry of Works. One was the practice in the industry, which we had to propose the amendment of the current act. Second was the management and ownership of assets in the Ministry of Works. We had to propose the Roads Authority Bill. Then the issue of funding, we had to propose the Road Funds Bill. So it was going to deal with the tripartite issues that we had in the industry. So, but the president was able to sign the current act. Unfortunately, the Road Fund Bill and the Roads Authority Bill were not signed. Now, presently, the Ninth Assembly has re-engineered those bills, and they have had to concurrence in the Senate, and they've been transmitted to Mr. President. The road fund will deal with sustainable funding of roads. Actually, you appreciate that the budgetary intervention annually is inadequate.
Yes.
A ministry or an agency that has close to 5 trillion commitment, contractual commitment, but budgets 200 billion annually with an outstanding liability of about 420 billion. You need some extra help. So the road fund is proposing, is going to be a repository of funds that you can get from road user charges, from various sources, including tolling, including through weighing bridges. But it becomes a fund that will be used as a basis for maintenance of roads. The annual budgetary appropriation becomes an intervention. So you need such seed capital to be able to make progress. Then if you deal with the Roads Authority Bill, it deals with the framework for sustainable development of roads. And I believe strongly that these bills are before Mr. President now, and we need to have some level of advocacy for him to get it signed.
Give us a sense of your own evaluation of the state of our roads as someone who was chairman committee on works for so long. Give us a sense of what you feel, either in your constituency or even moving around our country?
Yeah, I'll give you very clear-cut examples. And it does not depend on who is president or who is occupying any position. If, for instance, you go from Abuja from Suleja to Mina, you'll find out the deplorable state of roads there. We have had 2 presidents from there. If you go from Kano to Katsina, you'll find out that the road needs some intervention and help. East-West Road, in spite of the fact that it leads to Otroke, could not be done. And is still a growing concern.
Yeah.
If you move from Lagos to Abeokuta, you'll find out that the states are deplorable. Then you look at Enugu, Port Harcourt, Enugu, Onitsha. They are in a very poor state. So the state that we were 10 years ago are the same situation. From Abuja to Abeokuta and down to Lokoja is the same. You would have witnessed protests in Abuja-Kaduna Road, and then you would have also witnessed protests in Sapele. So these are very evident issues that we are hurting as a country. And you can imagine that the process of Road Fund and Roads Authority started in 1971. People have come to learn how we are trying to address our problem. They've gone back to their countries to, have these bills enacted into law. So there isn't anything, the president can't even help himself, the incoming president can't help himself unless we find avenues to address these challenges. And the avenues to address them is the assent of these bills. There isn't any way somebody who is budgeting 200 billion and he's owing 420 billion and he has a contractual commitment of 4.2 trillion will go anywhere. So the funds is simply not enough. The roads are in bad state, and I can tell you, if we continue in this situation for the next 10 years, there isn't anything that will change.
Now, many people have also posited that in our country, we are so interested in awarding contracts for this, for that road, for that water project, when we can actually get the private sector involved in build, operate, and transfer model. Where do you stand on this?
Well, thank you very much. The PPP arrangement is a good model, but it has to be operated under a framework. And that is a legal framework. And that is what those bills deal with. You will remember that just about 4-6 months back, there have been talk about intervention by Dangote. There have been talk about intervention by MTN and Transcorp and some other private sector companies. But under which platform? Under which legal framework? These are good policies, but it must be done in such a way that it is sustainable. And that is what the bill does. Most roads in other jurisdictions are funded from the private sector and by citizens. In the past, we complained about toll gates that people were pilfering, they were not reporting to government. The roads have become intelligent. Your CCTV can give you immediate report. You draw a rope across the road, it gives you the numbers. You can also do e-tolling. And let me tell you, Jide and my friends there, the point to make is that it is not just possible for us to sustain this situation. It is much more expensive for us to drive a car and spend 5 hours on Enugu or Onitsha instead of getting the roads in good shape and doing just 45 minutes. The same thing goes for Abuja Kano, and the same thing goes for Abuja to Lokoja. So I'm in all fours with private sector participation, but it has to be done under a framework. It cannot be subject to the whims and caprices of individuals. Otherwise, let me say, for instance, the mooted idea of intervention by NNPC. What if they change the managing director? What if the Minister of Works is, goes, and the person who comes and says, look, I don't know what you're talking about. NNPC, whose scope of work is to do refineries, harvest crude oil, and transport them to destinations, is going into roads. Look, I got no money for it. But if it is under a legal framework where there is a contract, where the road fund bill comes into place, and then roads authority comes into place, and there are legal persons that can undertake contracts and deal with private sector companies, you can do that, and you cannot be seen to be breaching the contract. So I believe that private sector participation is good, but it has to be regimented. It has to be tailored towards a sustainable model. And that is what we are talking about here.
Are you convinced that the bills can give us the money to fix all the bad roads?
Yeah, well, it may not give you all the money, but it becomes a seed capital for you to start. First and foremost, if you do an audit of the roads, you'll find out that there are roads that have 50,000 traffic per day. There are roads that have 10,000. And the level of utilization of road determines the level of input you have to make and the level of deterioration they experience. So whereas it may not give you all, you will have that as an additional avenue, including the intervention through the appropriation bill. And moreover, you can also, as a body that is corporate and can take loans, you can also do interventions on road development. But I believe that it will go a long way in providing a good source of revenue, and if not all, at least it will help.
Okay, but what about all this flip-flop in our policies? It's something that Nigerians have been worried about. At some point, we had the toll gates. At some point, it had to go. At some point, it returned. And then maybe addressing this along the politicization of even the obligations that we entered into. I would prefer if a government says, okay, we have signed this with this, another government which is not favorably disposed to the company comes in and says, we are giving it to that. Are you considering those two issues alongside what you are proposing now?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that when you operate under the rule of law, any breach, any intervention that is outside it will be very clear. And the expectation of the Nigerian people is that you operate under the law. So political intervention and the law is what cures it, that makes it possible that you have a framework for operation. But if you don't have a framework for operation, anybody who comes will just jettison anything he wants to do. So there's going to be interference. I remember Jide asked a while ago, there was a question regarding continuing to award contracts. You cannot stop it because it's always a pressure point. People are having their roads expanded, the roads are deteriorating, and there are no repairs. So you can have a representative come, he'll put you under tremendous pressure to award his road. The only way to cure that is to have some of these roads go to private sector, let them be sustained. And as a matter of fact, I will posit that if we want to solve the problem of unemployment, the way to go is to go into maintenance. If you give a contract for 2 years, you finish the contract and you are gone. If you concession a road for 40 years, you will hire engineers, administrators, and technicians for 35 years. And that's the lifespan of their work life. So that is the way to go. And when you put an armada of engineers across Nigerian roads, you find out you don't have even enough engineers. So interference will continue to come, and once you don't begin to deal with the problems, they will continue to multiply.
I would like to ask you why the National Assembly felt that Federal Roads Maintenance Agency had to go. What was the thinking behind this decision?
FEMA.
Yeah, the point is that, I mean, it's better to have an entity that is all-encompassing. FEMA, as it is to do, it still goes cap in hand begging for money. And that money is not coming. So when you have a roads authority bill, as you have in other places, it will have a large department for maintenance. There will be synchronization of efforts. There will be departments for new road development, but under a very clear-cut management. So we can't continue creating all manner of agencies with multiplication of personnel. But FEMA, as it is today, is not fit for purpose because they are still expecting to get money from public treasury. But if we have this roads authority bill, which will also absorb FEMA, then we have a department that clearly deals with road maintenance and will be much more efficient. And the interface between the road development and road maintenance will be effective.
Okay, people say you lawmakers are to blame for many uncompleted contracts across the country. New contracts, all the time, instead of completing the old ones. Right now, we have a lot of roads uncompleted and abandoned projects all around the country.
Well, thank you very much. It's very fashionable to accuse the lawmakers of everything, but we do not award contracts. And your responsibility is to represent your people. But let me tell you the problem we solved as lawmakers. When we came in 2015, you will remember the second Niger Bridge and Lagos Ibadan were usually controversial. They were under PPP. First by Courtney in Lagos Ibadan, then the second was motorways. But each of these contracts has no framework for completion. The second Niger Bridge was also on a PPP, with federal government paying 30 billion. What happened? They were simply awarding piecemeal contracts, early works 1, early works 2, early works 3. Then the House, through a motion in Parliament, investigated and had a public hearing on those two roads. What did we do? We said that the PPP arrangements were not working because they don't have a framework for completion of the projects. And we told the federal government in our report that, look, if your assets have been given out on contract and they are not working, please settle your liabilities and take them back. That was how those contracts came, that those roads came back and bridge came back to the Ministry of Works. You can ask the Minister of Works now. He was there and he was in our public hearing. And he said clearly that the things were not working. And we asked them that they should take back the assets and begin to work effectively. That was how Lagos Ibadan and the second Niger Bridge and Abuja Kano had to be brought within the realm of Sovereign Wealth Fund. And those are the only roads that are guaranteed to be finished in this country. You can take that to the bank. So any other one is just as, your guess is as good as mine.
No, I think the point that Ayo was trying to raise was during budgeting, the average lawmaker will push for certain road contracts to be brought to his constituency so that your constituents don't accuse you of not representing them effectively. And in the process, projects that were started the previous years, funding that ought to be released to complete them get diverted to new contracts. I think that's the point that he's making, because at your level as a lawmaker, you're able to influence projects to your constituency, though you do not directly award contract, but you are capable of influencing new projects to your areas.
Babajide, in every jurisdiction, lobbying or influence is not a crime.
I know. But you know, express your funds thinly.
If you are not there to represent your people and lobby for road project, what are you there to do? But what I'm telling you is that the pressure points for our communities, for the national road network, will continue to increase. It didn't start today. It will continue to increase until we have additional avenues. Our problem is revenue, not the number of roads. People have to get to their homes, and people have to do roads that, are important to their people. But let me tell you clearly, the position of lawmakers is that funding of roads is a priority, and these roads that are being awarded are critical. Even if you stop awarding contracts as proposed by the minister, I agree. But you need 7.4 trillion to finish already existing contracts. If you stop it, you cannot finish based on 200 billion per annum. You can't finish it in 20 years.
It will even degenerate.
So we have to wear a thinking cap and think on how to solve it through other means.
We'll talk to him again.
I want to thank you, Honorable Toby Okechukwu. Thank you. He used to be the chairman of the House of Representative Committee on Works. Thank you for your intervention today. Jide?
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully you will be back to talk to us
again
on this bill and road projects in our country, because it's a continuous issue. We hope that someday we'll be able to look back and say, yes, we've done something very significant in addressing the big problem of decrepit roads in our country.
And it's a big deal when you have thousands of kilometers of roads across the country that are not motorable, or you end up in the mechanic workshop
or even in the doctor's place, because these things are stressful.
Very stressful.
Good. And the truth is this: Nigerians don't mind paying for services. That's what we have seen, especially when you look at it from the area of power and telecoms. We have been complaining about charges and all the rest. But if you get the service, for instance, the power companies are telling us, we give you power for 20 hours. You pay more than the people I will give for 8 hours. So it's your decision, it's your choice. At that point, if one network is not giving you the service, you move to another.
Yes,
You port. We don't have the opportunity now.
They introduced that language.
The port.
Yes. I'm
porting. You port and you get your service elsewhere. So what we want as Nigerians, even if we have to pay more, is let us even see what we are paying for.
Let's see what we are paying for. Because it can even make the difference between life and death.
Exactly.
Good roads can make the difference between life and death, because some death traps, when you travel on them and you are not used to the road,
honestly,
anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Anything.